Number 1.
Tara Suzette Breckenridge, age 23, was last seen in Houston, Texas on August 4, 1992. She was caught on surveillance leaving her job as a waitress at the men's club at 3303 Sage Road. According to her manager, Hal Nauman, it was a slow night and volunteers were sought to leave early. Tara volunteered. This was reportedly unusual for Tara. A security guard walked Tara to her car without incident, and this was the last confirmed sighting of her. At about 5 a.m., her boyfriend, Wayne Hecker, stated he arrived home expecting Tara to be there, but she had not arrived. He went out to look for her, and discovered her car on the side of the 1200 block of West Loop Road near 12th Street, about 3 miles from the club. The car was locked, the alarm was not set, and the mace she carried for protection was in plain sight in her car. The alternator belt had been cut, suggesting that whoever caused her disappearance likely planned it, and followed her after sabotaging her car. Wayne, who died in 2015, has been considered a person of interest in her disappearance from the beginning, although he always denied involvement. He had been at a nearby pool hall that night, and witnesses there stated that Wayne left at midnight and came back at about 1:45 a.m. He reportedly asked the bartender to say he was there the whole time. As the bartender explained, Wayne was looking to work as a bartender at the pool hall, and the night of Tara's disappearance, he was supposed to be working as a barback. The bartender, at the time, assumed that Wayne made this request because he didn't want to lose his potential job. While Wayne has always been the main person of interest, some believe there could be other explanations for her disappearance. It's been pointed out that Wayne would not have known that Tara had left work early, and nobody at the men's club remembers him calling her. There was also a customer at the club who was pursuing Tara, writing her notes to try to convince her to leave her boyfriend. From what can be seen in some of the notes, it appears she was planning to leave Wayne, or was playing along with the customer, who regularly left her $100 tips. Another person of interest who had been looked at early on was Robert Beatty, who contacted family and friends of Tara, sometimes claiming he was a police officer. He made claims that he was about to make an arrest, and he also contacted media outlets informing them of an upcoming search. He never showed up at the time and location given for the search. Beatty was arrested for impersonating a police officer, and police found handcuffs, a BB gun, and detective magazines at his home. He told police he felt that the person responsible for Tara's disappearance was a cab driver and detective wannabe. And you guessed it, Beatty was a cab driver. Tara's family never believed Beatty was responsible for Tara's disappearance. Tara was from Del Rio, Texas. She had relocated to Houston in 1989 to pursue her photography interest, and had taken the job at the men's club to support herself until she could get her photography career off the ground. The Breckenridge family has had more than their share of tragedy. Tara's sister Tammy died in a plane crash in 1986 at the age of 22. Her brother, Timothy, died by drowning in 2008 at age 43, while participating in a celebration of their parents' wedding anniversary at Lake Amistad. Tara's parents have both passed away, and her other sister, Toby, committed suicide in 2017 at age 47. She has 2 brothers living, as well as many friends who still wait for answers.
Number 2.
Ashley Fuller Reed, age 19, vanished from Garland, Texas on January 15, 1990. Ashley made plans to meet 2 men, known only as Dave and Robert, for dinner at an IHOP restaurant on Interstate 635 and Military Parkway in nearby Dallas, Texas. She called her mother at work to tell her of her plans, and also mentioned that she might go with friends to Corsicana, Texas. The identities of Dave and Robert remain a mystery. A witness reported seeing Ashley at the restaurant talking with a man dressed in cowboy attire. Ashley's car was later found abandoned on the on-ramp of LBJ Parkway at Military Parkway, near her home. When the car was found, it had a dead battery, but once the battery was recharged, the hazard lights began blinking. Her purse and keys were not in the vehicle. It's not known whether there were any problems with the vehicle that might have caused her, or whoever was driving the car, to pull over there and turn on the hazard lights. 2 fishermen reported having found Ashley's purse in a gravel pit near Trinity River and Boys Stark Road. They had looked inside and seen papers with Ashley's name on them. He contacted police, but when they went to retrieve the purse, they were unable to locate it. It would later be discovered that Melissa Northrup's body had been found at the same location. Kenneth McDuff was executed in 1998 for Melissa's 1992 murder. McDuff knew Melissa. She was the wife of his manager at the Waco, Texas convenience store where he worked. Ashley had only recently moved to the Dallas area from Minnesota in October 1989 when her mother received a job opportunity. Ashley had gotten a job at JoJo's restaurant in Addison, Texas, and was working on rebuilding her social circle when she vanished. She'd had a boyfriend in Minnesota whom she'd been involved with until she moved to Texas. Her former boyfriend traveled to Texas in the spring of 1990, along with other friends of Ashley's, to help search for her. Although it seems ominous that she was meeting these 2 guys only known by their first names, I don't necessarily think they were involved in her disappearance. The location of her car, and the fact that the hazard lights were on, leads me to think she was on her way home, and believed she was having car trouble. It's certainly possible that Robert or Dave, or the man in cowboy attire, could have followed her. I don't think that's any more likely than other scenarios, Tbo. Nonetheless, it would be interesting to figure out who Robert and Dave were. She hadn't lived in the area long, and had finished high school in Minnesota. My guess would be that she'd met Robert and or Dave through her job at JoJo's restaurant. Perhaps her coworkers or other customers saw her talking to them. Although both are in the greater Dallas area, some reports suggest she lived in Carrollton, as opposed to Garland. The two cities are in opposite directions from Dallas.
Number 3.
Marcus Rutledge, age 23, vanished from Nashville, Tennessee on June 8, 1998. Marcus is believed to have last been seen at his home, at 2741 Parkdale Drive in Nashville. He called the mother of his toddler son, and left a message on her answering machine. When she called him back, he did not answer. After being unable to reach him, she went to his house and found everything to be in place, except that Marcus was not there, and his dog was locked in the bathroom without food. This is highly uncharacteristic of Marcus, who loved animals, and was studying to become a veterinarian. His red Plymouth Neon was later found at the Riverwood Apartments at 7388 Cabot Drive in Nashville. Marcus was a senior at Tennessee State University at the time of his disappearance. He and his son's mother, who lived separately, were planning a big birthday party for their son. The boy's birthday came and went without anyone hearing from Marcus. There was no indication that Marcus intended to be away for an extended period of time, and he was not known to be involved in any criminal activity. He enjoyed reading, computers, and playing the saxophone. His parents lived in Michigan, and he had a room there as well, which he used when he visited. His father, David Rutledge, is a former state representative in the Michigan House of Representatives. His mother died in 2015. Police have stated that foul play is suspected. I've seen no details of whether his phone records showed anything that might be connected to his disappearance, or if anything was found to suggest that his car wasn't driven to Cabot Drive by him. I'm curious if he knew anyone who lived in those apartments. If alive, Marcus would be 45 years old now. I hope he can be found soon.
Number 4.
Judy Gail Jurgens, age 18, went missing from St. Louis Park, Minnesota on October 1, 1982. Judy left a note for her parents, stating that she was going to Texas with her boyfriend, Curtis White. Her boyfriend was seen back in Minnesota following this incident, but Judy has never been seen again. It's worth noting that her profiles on missing persons sites state that he returned without her, which would suggest that they actually did go to Texas, but I'm not sure if there's any evidence that they left town at all. It seems the note was the last contact. If she contacted her family from Texas, that would most likely be considered her last known location. Texas law enforcement would hopefully be involved as well, but they don't appear to be. Very little is known about her disappearance. If she ever was in Texas, and anyone saw her, they probably wouldn't realize it. Texas is a huge state, and there's no indication of where in Texas they may have been headed. I've seen nothing about what she'd taken with her, which might offer a clue as to how long she planned to be away. I'm guessing her boyfriend was questioned at some point, but I've never seen anything about where, or under what circumstances he said he last saw her. The fact that she left a note suggests that her family wouldn't have approved of her decision to travel to Texas. Maybe she discussed her plans in more detail with friends. It doesn't appear that there was much, if any, media publicity at the time, or at any time since. I'm hoping that someone will stumble across this story who can help fill in some of the blanks that could help in figuring out what happened to Judy.
Number 5.
Tina Faye Kemp, age 14, vanished from her home, a half-mile south of Fulton, Delaware on February 3, 1979. On the morning of her disappearance, Tina helped her mother hang clothes on the clothesline, and left their home on Main Street at about 9 a.m. She never returned. She has a history of running away, but only for a short time. She enjoyed going to horse racing tracks. Her boyfriend at the time never heard from her after her disappearance, which he and her family felt was unusual. As far as I've been able to tell, Tina did not tell anyone where she was going when she departed the house. She wasn't dressed adequately to be outdoors for long. A snowstorm hit Fulton the following day, so it was likely quite cold. When Tina left, she wore only a flannel shirt, a sweater, jeans and sneakers. She also wore a leather band around her arm with Eric imprinted on it, which leads me to think her boyfriend may have been named Eric. Although it doesn't appear that anyone in her family has any idea what happened to Tina, I think some clues could be gleaned from the previous occasions that she'd run away. Had she ever told anyone where she'd gone? Did she have the same boyfriend, and had he been in touch with her while she was away on prior disappearances? It's certainly possible that she hitchhiked, went to a racetrack where she crossed paths with a predator, or fell victim to the elements due to .tbe storm. However, since she was seen leaving the house, it seems she, at least initially, left of her own accord. It would have been a 10 minutes walk into town, if she'd just been headed to a friend's house or a McDonald's or something there. Aside from downtown Fulton, there isn't really any place she could have reasonably walked to, unless it were a neighbor's home or the home of a friend who also lived south of town. What really bothers me about Tina's disappearance is the lack of publicity. Aside from a couple snippets included in recent articles about other missing persons, there is nothing that I could find in the way of media coverage. I'm sure the police were convinced she was a runaway. They assumed virtually all teens and young adults had left voluntarily and would return in a couple days. The fact that she'd run away previously was an added factor. But 40 years later, the probability of her returning has decreased significantly, and it still doesn't appear that much is being done. She was just a kid, and she and her family deserve so much better.